Yeah. That's doing something.
And anyone who's watching this on replay, you can skip ahead 4.5 minutes, then you get to the start of this actual session with Jane on trauma and female pelvis. I forget the actual title. What's the actual title, Jane?
Inner strength.
Inner strength.
And the female pelvis.
Yes. Natalie, I'll just be here in the background like I've been for everyone's probably first and second sessions and stuff, because as Jane said, everyone's a bit stressed out when it's hosting can be a little bit like, particularly since there's so many things going on all over the place. Like I'm used to like this. Last year I was just doing every single one for every single day, and it was crazy. But yeah, it's a little bit.
I'm not as stressed as I was about the ones at the embodiment conference, because I had no idea how Facebook or anything ran. How Zoom ran before I did that. So now I've been spending a lot of time on Zoom. I feel a lot more comfortable with that aspect. Yeah, we should be good.
Nice. I'll be here just in case, but obviously I generally try not to. I'll turn my video off and stuff, just let you guys take over. And the thing, how are you feeling, Jane, by the way, as well? For this is obviously a session you're teaching.
Yeah, no, I feel good. I'm intrigued to see what, where it goes, depending on who comes, and but I'm just gonna try and keep it very general. And it's like that safety thing of like this isn't therapy, this is education. Yeah.
Okay, terrific. Do we want to let people in, or what do we want to do? What do you wait until the last minute before you do that?
No, we can let them in and let them settle. Tell them that normal stuff beforehand, like locations or those sorts of things.
Like the what? Oh, the locations. Okay. Yep. Let's go. Okay. Well, you've done it.
I get impatient. I'm one of those people like, oh, we're letting them in, aren't we? Oh, I just clicked the button. I'm like, oh, wait, we didn't agree, did we? Oops.
You want to see who's here? Welcome to those of you who are entering the room now. It's wonderful to have you here with us. So while we're waiting for this session to start, I see some people have been here before. So if you don't mind, if you'd like to rename yourself and just let us know where you are in the world, you just tap on the three little dots at the top right-hand corner of your picture on the screen or your box on the screen, or go to your little more box on the right-hand side of your name in the participants. What is that? Tab box on the side of the screen as well. You can also use the chat function if you feel like letting us know what led you into this session right now. If you have anything that you're really excited or keen to be learning about now, type things into the chat box.
I'd love to hear that. Hi everyone. I'm facilitating this session. So if there are particular things about the female pelvis that you are pondering on, please do put it in the chat.
And it would also be nice if you're comfortable having your camera on for Jane to have somebody to talk to. So if you're happy to do that, have your camera switched on. There might be many reasons that you don't want your camera switched on as well, and that would be fine too.
But I would actually appreciate it, because we're going to be talking about trauma and the pelvis, and it's really useful for me to see how it's landing with you. So it's always your choice, but I do appreciate it. But this is embodied work, so it's always good to see bodies and human beings.
On the hour, so you can press record and get going.
Alrighty, okay, we are ready to go. So let me just hit the record button. All right, we've got some people popping some things into the chat. section. So welcome to everybody here. Welcome to the Inner Strength, which is all about trauma and the female pelvis, with Jane Dancy, who is your facilitator today. Jane is an embodiment coach and yoga teacher. Her upbringing left a trail of loss resulting in trauma and disconnection. Jane's trauma healing journey informs her work with women of all ages. She's a certified embodiment facilitator, a somatic coach, a senior embodied yoga principles teacher, and a single mum to one teen girl. You want her as your posh English aunt. I really like that. My name's Natalie, and I'll be hosting this session, and I'm also facilitating any tech issues that you might have. So please message me, put a little message in the chat box if you have any problems, and I'll do my best to help you out with those. Now, if you're comfortable turning your camera on, please have your camera switched on, and that way Jane will be able to interact with you a little bit more fully. It's a bit nicer for her to be speaking to some faces rather than just speaking to a blank screen. So no matter what you're doing, it gives us some really good feedback. Now, please share this with anyone who wants to uncover any subtle ways in which trauma shows up in your life. Right? All of the once the live sessions are finished, the replays will be sent out to you. So please share it far and wide. Share it with anyone who you think might benefit from these sessions. So we'll tell you a little bit more about the courses that we have for offer at the end of this. Things are super cheap right now. It's really, really good. We'd like to get more people involved in learning about how they can assist not only themselves, but maybe some other people when it comes to trauma occurring in their lives. There's a few safety things that we'd like to start off with. So how are you resourced right now? Are you feeling okay if things come up for you? Do you have some things that you can use to help yourself out? If things do come up and you're not feeling so great? Is watching trauma episodes or sessions, is it kind to you? Maybe you'd be best served with one-on-one therapy. So this is an educational session. It's not about therapy, and it's not designed for people who are currently facing any type of bad trauma right now. Right? There isn't any judgment about it, but you do need to be robust for the session. So please don't binge. I know today you're able to watch all of the sessions without any extra sort of expense or anything coming into it, but don't binge, right? There are replays available until the 22nd of September. Right, so if you do get tense or agitated, a little bit tongue-tied today, if you get tense or agitated or space out, just move and breathe. You can have a little bit of a shake around. Maybe you can find some nature once you're out and about. But having said this, it could all be a little bit of fun. It can be a lot of fun. So that is quite a mouthful. I hope you enjoyed this session with Jane. Let's take it away, Jane. So thanks so much for bearing with me for all of that one. Okay.
Thank you so much, Natalie. Hi, everyone. It's really good to see you all. I'm going to be talking about the female pelvis and trauma and how it relates to inner strength. So within the session, I'm going to talk about why it is a major deal for us with female bodies, what some of the causes are with trauma, and also what can be helpful with stepping towards a path of healing. But a little bit why I do this work. So I'm an embodiment coach, a somatic yoga teacher, and I run an online course called the Embodied Female Pelvis. And I've also started running teacher trainings for yoga teachers around being female pelvis informed from a trauma perspective. My interest and my passion for this work comes from my own journey with my pelvis. I've through the whole my life cycle, I've gone through the whole realms of shame, disconnection, sexual trauma, emergency medical procedures, termination, real disconnect, and that's just some of them, and it's been a real journey for myself. I really want the platform for women to change around the pelvis and how it's seen for themselves and in society. So Natalie said about the safety issues. When working with, what I noticed that when I work with the female pelvis, things can arise. It might be stuff that you already know about, or it might be stuff that just arises. So I'm going to hand that responsibility over to you to have your resource, whatever that might be, with firm pressure, pressing your feet down, taking your eyes away from the screen, whatever is useful for you to keep yourself in your body. So, first of all, I'd love for you to put in the chat, what's the first thing that comes to your mind, or the first bodily sensation when you hear the word female pelvis? So, the female pelvis is one part of our body, but it's actually so connected to every part of the body. It's the big mover, the shaker of the body. It's got the sexual organs around reproduction, menstruation, elimination. It's the main stabilizer of the body. And the pelvic diaphragm, also known as the pelvic floor, unhelpfully known as the pelvic floor, and I'll talk about that in a bit, is part of a system of diaphragms in the body that all work together. So it's very much very connected. It's also deeply connected to the nervous system and the vagus nerve. It's also, so that's like the physical side. It's also the seat of female creativity, of sexuality, sensuality, femininity. It's where our cyclical ways come into being, what some people call the blood mysteries of menstruation. It's seen as a sacred space, and it's very much connected to our power, our sense of self, and courage and assertiveness. It's created in our pelvic bowls. As a rites of passage facilitator, I'm also really, really aware that all our major transitions and thresholds of the feminine existence very much take place in the female pelvis, from first sexual awakening through puberty, menarche, which is when the first bleed starts, pregnancy, childbirth, perimenopause, and menopause. There's a lot going on in the pelvis through each threshold. And like I said, it's very connected to our inner strength. If I am fully residing in my pelvis, I can access my root power, and that strong inner strength. It's connected to our sexual vitality. And when I say sexual vitality, I don't mean just for intercourse sex. I mean our vitality of life force. So I remember reading in this book where it said, I think it was Mama Jenna, she said that, you know what, if women were fully residing in their pelvis and really having a hold on that power, that big businesses would look so different, because there'd be much more potential to be out there and really being in one's power. So now we come to trauma. My belief is that everyone in a female body has a history of trauma in their pelvis. It's a universal experience. And when I say trauma, let's think about the big trauma, the capital T trauma, and also the little trauma, the little t's. And I know from my own experiences that there was a lot of trauma that happened in my life that I did not consider trauma. I kind of brushed it to one side. There was a lot of shame, a lot of guilt, and it took a process for me to recognize it as trauma. let's look at how two sides of trauma in the pelvis. There's the physical and the psychological, and they're very interwoven. Like I was kind of separating them out, and then I was realizing that it's separation is not helpful because they one influences the other. So with the physical, there is the actual physical trauma of that happens through sexual trauma, rape, sex without consent. There's medical procedures. So I talked my own history of emergency medical procedure through an ectopic pregnancy. But there's also the very routine medical procedures that happen: the smear test, the fitting of coils, the treatment of abnormal cells, loop diathermy, terminations of pregnancy, childbirth, UTIs, endometriosis, PCOS, all of this, and the list goes on and on and on. And all of that has the potential to create physical trauma, and then that can be psychological as well. There's also a thing about a real lack of education and a lack of education around bodily based consent. So there's the bodily based consent, and then there's the verbal consent. And those two ideally are aligned. Another big topic that is not spoken about much is, going back to the physical, is incontinence. The amount of women who experience incontinence on a daily basis, and it's not spoken about. And that creates trauma. And that can arise through physical trauma. It can also arise through psychological trauma. And there's a lot of medical procedures that happen to the female pelvis that sometimes don't actually need to happen. I'm talking hysterectomies, removals of ovaries. Yeah, sometimes these things have to happen, and other times they're taken without the real consideration of other possibilities, and the whole issue around vaginal mesh that leaves a long-lasting physical, psychological trauma. And talking of stress, there is the daily impact of stress. It's like when you get stressed, what happens in your body? You know, I know for me, I pull up, and that goes up through the vulva, up through the vaginal canal, up through the pelvic diaphragm. So when we are stressed, what's going on in our nervous system is coming up through our body. This is alongside the psychological of the disconnect. It's a very unknown part of the female body. It's often bypassed. It's not really mentioned in a body scan or in a yoga class. There's the talk of the hips, but there's not much talk of the pelvis, or only in terms of pelvic floor, got to fix it. I think there's something really useful in naming these parts, because that's one of the ways that we reintegrate parts of ourselves, is by naming and mapping. So there's a real lack of knowledge, and there's also a lot of knowledge. There's a lot of education out there that's not helpful. There was a report in the BBC recently that horrified me, that they were suggesting to do pelvic floor education and exercises for young girls so they don't experience incontinence later on in their life. You know, just so wrong on so many levels. There's so much shame around the female pelvis. It's a part of the body that's disrespected. There's a lot of guilt, a lot of fear. All our sexual organs, our genitalia is inside us. We can't see it unless we put a mirror there and have a look. It's very different to the little boy looking down at his penis and going, oh yeah, there's my penis, there's my testicles. And then there's menstrual shame. that's huge. How a young girl navigates dealing with blood every month, with pads, with school, with public toilets, school toilets. Some girls, it's like, you know, this is across the board with trauma. There are events. Some people are traumatized by them and some are not. Some girls sail through this, others really, really, really struggle with it. There's also a lot around painful sex, and sex should never be painful. Lack of sexual pleasure, pleasure being unknown, the inability to reach orgasm. I like to really look as well at the language around the female pelvis. Language lands somatically in our body. There was research done that if a woman works in a work space where the female genitalia are disrespected through words, that actually has an impact on the tissues within her vaginal canal. So language lands somatically. But the good thing is that if it goes in a negative way, it can also go to a positive as well. So that's something we can really work with. There's also the terminology, the medical terminology, that can be really unhelpful. I've mentioned pelvic floor. It's not a pelvic floor, it's a pelvic diaphragm. We don't have floors in our body. And also, while I mention that, our organs don't fall out. They can't. Our organs are supported in this beautiful web of connective tissues. When women hear those words from a medical person in a place of power, that can have a real detrimental effect on themselves and on their bodies. This language needs to be changed. The words like maladaptive, dysfunctional, deficient ovaries. How many times have I read that about perimenopause and the menopause? It's not a deficiency, it's a natural threshold that a woman goes through. So there's really something that we can do with language for ourselves, but also for those women and girls who are younger than us. It's about reclaiming the language and reclaiming the landscape of the feminine pelvis. I'm just going to take a breather there. So just checking in with you all. How's this all landing? One of the things that I really like to think about is pacing and rhythm. Yeah, so just allowing things to drop in. Let's move on to what can be helpful, because there's lots. So first of all, safe spaces to explore this. Having a space like this in which to discuss it. Women's groups are so powerful. When I sit in circles of women and we talk about these things, something really shifts. Positive education. But really opening up those discussions, opening up naming the shadowy parts and bringing them out. And a lot of the time with the shadowy parts, we want to kind of do away with them. It's finding ways to embrace them. All of that shame and that guilt, that always arises as a protective manner. You know, that time when I was a very little girl and I was just discovering self-pleasuring, and I hear that voice of my brother saying, "Mum, she's doing it again, stop it." Yeah, that's a loud voice. And thinking, well, you know, my brother probably was a bit confused and my mum, bless her, didn't know what to do. Yeah, so it kind of bringing that back in and going through the whole cycle, processing it. But when I say that, I've worked a while to get to that point. It was a long time where I didn't even want to say it out loud. One thing really useful to remember is that there tends to be, especially with the female pelvis, a jump to want to fix. It's all about the pelvic floor. So many women come to me, to my group work, to one-to-one work, where they have a physical problem and there's a lot of fear and they want to fix it. We are in a fix-it culture. And in some ways that's useful, because the physical component allows them to come into the work, and it allows them to come in a safe way, and then they can start to work with the other layers when they feel right. So my first port of call is connecting to this part of the body awareness, through body mapping, education. I use things like my felted womb. So this I actually got first when I was working with girls around puberty. I realized it's actually really good for grown-up people as well. So education, mapping, going through the actual physicality, and getting to becoming intimate and knowledgeable. For the longest time, I was never too sure where my organs were, what's in front of the other. It was like I would look at an anatomical diagram. I'd keep looking at it through the years and years of yoga study, and it just would not remain in my head. And I believe that is because I had so much disconnect with my pelvis. It's like I couldn't, if I'm not mapped physically, how can I map it in my brain? So really finding ways, like I work with the pelvis, and I get people to put one hand on the front of their pubic bone and one hand around their sacrum. And it's like, hello, here's the bladder, here's the rectum. And then in the middle, can only be in the middle, is the womb, the uterus. So simple ways to really reawaken these parts within ourselves. And very much finding the right rhythm for you, the right pacing, and really honoring that. There's and it might not be that full-on tantra course. Yeah, there's so many courses, so many possibilities to do healing around the pelvis, around sexuality, around all of these things. And they might not be the right pacing. So really checking in and doing it at what feels comfortable, and being aware when you come out of comfort. So that thing of what they sometimes call pendulation, of like dipping your toe in, going ooh, and then coming back out, coming back in, coming back out. And that's okay. That's a really good solid way of doing it. If we try and jump in the deep end, it's just going to lead to more re-traumatization. It's a bit like how you teach a little kid to swim. You don't just dump them in the deep end. That's not nice. You have loads of armbands and slowly you start to take them off. It keeps it going in the right way. So really learning also about sexual anatomy. When I started educating myself around this, it was such a game changer. One of my favorite books is Come As You Are by Emily Nabowski, and where she talks about the landscape of sexual arousal within the female body for women is completely different to a man's sexual arousal. And that, just that fact that it can take up to 40 minutes for our erectile tissue to become engorged. And that if it's not engorged, we're not ready for any kind of penetration or any kind of touch. And then that leads to consent and bodily based consent. So really knowing when your body says yes and knowing when your body says no. And that idea that when the vulva is saying yes, there is a sort of an upward, that the it's like come touch me. When the vulva is saying no, it's like, but there's so many incidences. I know from my own experience, how many times have I had sex when I'm not really ready for it? Oh, I didn't actually want it. Something to think about. So one of the really other helpful things to do is to explore yourself using a mirror. Again, with the embodied anatomy, and also exploring pleasure. So pleasure, I think, is it's our birthright, and it's a very healing thing to do. And when I say pleasure, I don't mean, I'm not jumping straight to sexual pleasure. I'm talking about the kind of pleasure that that we see that children do so well, and cats. My cat is the expert in pleasure. She is my big teacher. She knows exactly what to do. If there's a sunny bit in the garden, she'll go there because it's more pleasurable. So starting really, really slowly and just noticing, like, what kind of touch do I like? And actually, when we think about touch, also like consensual touch, so that I don't touch myself like an object. And you can try this with me if you would like to. Just touch your arm like it's a piece of meat and you're putting it somewhere. This is kind of more of a medicalized touch a lot of the time. Not always, not all medical professionals. Some are really well versed in not doing this, but just grab your arm, put it somewhere. That's one way. And then there's the other way of where there's a sort of, okay, arm, I'm gonna touch, is that okay? And then you touch, and there's connection. And then and it's a relationship. It's a relationship between my hand and the arm. So that's the kind of touch that we can get used to. And then we can think, okay, what feels nice? That feels nice. And then just go for more niceness. And then what we can with that, we can actually bring that touch to our pelvis. So you can bring, like I'm going to bring that touch down to the front of my pelvis and around the back. And just very gently starting to bring more of a relationship of that kind of touch and that kind of pleasure into my being, into my life. Also thinking, like, we live in a very non-linear world. I'm a big fan of non-linear sex. Like that whole idea of how sex should be is been given to us through bad TV and films. It's not like that. We're thinking about things that really, that not all about penetration, taking your time and really keeping connected to what feels right for you. And also acknowledging rites of passage. So really finding a way to either you can revisit your menarche, or if you're at a later stage of your life with perimenopause, you can think of ways to really embrace the perimenopause. And also, we are talking about trauma. So if you know that there is trauma there, get the support that you need. Do your own. When I run my courses or when I work with women, I when they're ready to do it, I invite them to do a circle of their pelvic life, so that they start from day dot, you know, inside their own mother's womb, and then work through, because it's you know, birth is very interesting to look at, and all the way round. It's also really useful to practice menstrual cycle awareness. And actually, before I forget about it, if you're doing your pelvic life cycle, a really interesting thing to think about is to think about your mother's relationship with her pelvis, because what trauma is, it's not just we're working with our own trauma, but we're also working with the trauma of the matriarchal line. I'm aware that we're at the end. So there's lots of things you can do. Non-linear movement, yoga that is pelvic friendly. Discover movement that celebrates this part of the body. Belly dancing. And to do it with, really cultivate compassion and gentleness, and find the rhythm that works for you. I'm going to hand back over to Natalie because I'm really going over time.
So unfortunately, I'm not Natalie, but Natalie's Zoom is playing up and she can't access anything. So I want to thank Jane. I don't think there's many, if any, men here, but it's really, really useful, I think, as well for men to be hearing this. So I actually really appreciate being at this talk. And thanks, Natalie, in the background, even though she can't come here. And thank you, Jane. And we're hoping actually maybe in the future for Jane to be doing something bigger around this. I believe she's doing some stuff as well, so you can find her. But just in terms of wrapping up, if you did have any takeaways, you can drop those in the chat so that Jane can see, and it's kind of useful for our feedback to see what really resonates for everyone here as well. I've also dropped a link there. I keep saying it, but please do share this event. Replays will be there until September 22, so people can still register. And if there's anyone in your life at all who would benefit from learning more about this, whether it is like a partner or a mother or a daughter or whoever else, this or any other topics, then please do share that with them so they can register. We've also got the course, which Jane has actually done a little bit on. So I might actually let Jane say a little bit about what she's done on it. I'll just bring it up and then she can mention anything. So there's 3 versions of the course. So we've got Ilan's shaking, which is a sort of shaking to heal. Obviously, there's a few modalities about healing trauma. There's things like TRE or EMDR or somatic experiencing or whatever. But we've made this super accessible. So we want as many people as possible to benefit from it. So we've made that really accessible. Ilan does some really cool reframes around trauma as well. So that's the healing aspect. And then if you want to go into your superpowers, your personal superpowers, or as a facilitator, looking at post-traumatic growth, what you learned from trauma and then building upon that. That's what these are about. There's also some live sessions, so Q&As and these sorts of things, more with the facilitators version, where there's 6 weeks of that. However, Jane, do you want to say anything about the little bit that you recorded in these superpower courses?
Yeah, so I talk a lot about my own trauma history with my pelvis, and what the journey that I've done towards healing, and also what that's given me in actual fact. And I'm also doing the some of the sessions, the 6-week sessions of mentoring on that as well for yoga teachers.
Great. So yeah, I'm not going to try and hard sell you. If that's right for you, then you can obviously go and check that out. These are all the teachers featured. We've got Pauline, we've got Mel Gutierrez, we've got Jane, Patricia, Mark, and Ilan, of course. So you can check that out if you're interested. Otherwise, just a few things that are coming up today, maybe some related stuff, and I'll just throw back to Jane in case there's anything like she wants to give as a takeaway. But in terms of what's coming up, we have got, as I said, there's a few things that you might consider related. So, for example, we've got how trauma impacts your love life. So Patricia's there with Mark, trauma and intimacy. We rescheduled Florian's session actually because he had a really bad migraine yesterday. So if LGBTQ plus is interesting, that's up next. We've got Q&As with Roger Mills, or if you want to also do a Q&A with Patricia, that's later on in the day, 6 p.m. UK time. Roger Mills is 12 p.m. And then, of course, we've got other stuff. We've got Trauma and Passion with Alana and Christina, looking at workaholic stuff with Patricia and Daniela. This one's going to be a lot of fun, and if you're easily offended, probably not for you.
It's going to be epic, Steve. It's going to be epic. If anyone does yoga or meditation, they should definitely come along. So obviously I'm not here for the female pelvis, but if anyone has questions about male pelvis stuff, I thought I'd drop by in case that might be helpful to help Jane out with her the other side of things, perhaps. Hey Jane, you have a good session.
Mark.
I'm in Moscow. I just had a cancelled thing here, so I thought I'd swing by and say hi. How'd it go?
Yeah, good.
I was just watching your superpowers thing last night. It was really touching, you know, very personal, and feel like you were very vulnerable, and that's going to help a lot of people. And like telling us, I think this sort of telling how we've told our stories in it is, it's a different way of learning. You know, it's not I'm the expert, here's some stuff to do. It's hey, we've been through some of this stuff.
Absolutely, we have to talk about these things. We don't have to. I'm comfortable in talking about it, but it's taken me a process to get to this point.
Yeah. So I just seen someone in the chats asked about the different packages. So I'll help Steve out there. Just gives he's probably bored of selling them. So the small cheap package is basically what works with trauma healing. We wanted to make something really accessible, so it's a cheap price, and it's the basics of Alan's method. It's not the only method to heal trauma, but it's a pretty good one. I do some shaking stuff myself, which is, you know, her main thing. And then we've got like more for the coaches. So the middle one is more about the superpowers. So it's not just sort of from, you can think of it like from bad to okay, it's from okay to great. Yeah. And the middle one's for everyone, kind of okay to great, the superpowers side of things. And the last one's particularly for facilitators, because, you know, for example, I don't personally need to know about the female pelvis, but it's bloody useful for me to know a little bit about it because I've got a lot of female clients. So that's the difference with the third one, is that I can watch sessions like this. And I've seen Jane's content before. I'm not watching it for me. I'm watching it because I've got women that I want to understand better who are my clients, and I can't personally relate, but at least I can kind of point them to some resources and things like that. So that's the third one, is think of it as like bad to okay, okay to great, helping other people get to great. Does that make sense? There's the three different possibilities.
And then, of course, there's different live stuff as well. So like the middle one, the personal one, has some Q&As, whereas the facilitators one has group sessions over 6 weeks. And the numbers are limited for that one, but don't let that make you rush into a decision, but it is limited, so it's more personal.
Yeah, I think a lot of people just want to ask questions, like you can be in a small group with Jane and actually just ask really personal questions that you don't want recorded, and, you know, that you could actually, there's a lot of stuff, Jane, right, that people aren't going to say on a thing like this.
Absolutely.
Just in closing, I just want to see if Jane wants to do anything in closing before I stop this, and then we can hang around for a little bit if anyone did have anything else.
Yeah, I think my closing piece on this is really find the rhythm and the pacing that honors where you are with your pelvis, and find those spaces that are supportive, where these things can be talked about.
Thank you, Jane, and thank you, Natalie, in your muted, unable to do anything absence at the end here, and thank you everyone for attending this. Yeah.
I'm happy to stay on for general trauma questions, though obviously I'm not very good at this particular theme. Jane, are you able to hang around for a little bit, or do you have to head off?
Happy to.
Yeah. So sort of any general trauma stuff or male pelvis stuff, you can aim at me. And obviously, if you've got, I imagine what you probably have is questions for Jane. So I'll shut up if you've got questions for her.
And I'll stop the stream and the recording just in case there's anything slightly more private or whatever.
And that book I mentioned was Come As You Are by Emily Nabowski.
Great book. Read it a couple of years ago.
It's brilliant. And I think a lot of this stuff around the female pelvis is really useful for men to have knowledge on it, in the same way that I've just bought a book on the male pelvis, because it's very relevant for me. I have a male partner, so it makes sense. Like in the same way, it's been very, very useful for him to understand my story, what I do, and why I do it.
I've listened to some of your cycle stuff as well, Jane, and a few other people. I found that very useful, very useful. Like one of my female colleagues yesterday, she just looked about her thoughts, and I kind of looked at her, I was like, "Are you okay?" And then like it was like, oh, "Okay," I kind of got where she was, and it was like, "All right, this makes a lot more sense." And I don't think I would have been able to kind of understand that so quickly a couple of years ago before I came across that stuff.
Yeah, no, it's very useful. Menstrual cycle awareness for general well-being, for mental health, but also for within a relationship, whether that's heterosexual or gay. It's